Hello and good morning. This is Priyanka Rawat, your host for the day, and welcome to GEHU Talkies. Today we have with us a renowned cognitive scientist from Department of Psychology, Illinois State University. Sir is best known for his work at wild systems theory. He has over 120 publications, dozens of paper, and a comic book collection in his name. Very much welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Let me introduce Sir to you. Sir's name is Professor J. Scott Jordan from Illinois State University. Sir, how is it to be in India?
Oh, it's utterly fantastic. The color scheme matches my own.
Okay.
I'm very much into saturated colors, and I just love how alive things are here. I've been here and then Shadra University campus for the most part.
Okay.
I visited Taj Mahal yesterday.
Oh.
So everything I've seen is just absolutely alive and beautiful.
And do you know Taj Mahal was once a part of Seven Wonders of World? How did
Yes.
you like it?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, they tell me that seeing it in the moonlight, in the full moon,
Ooh.
is the best way to see it. But it's stunning, simply. And then when you get up close and you recognize, or as the tour guide tells you, there's no paint,
Oh, yeah.
right? That it's all
It's a stone,
gemstones.
Sangamarmar ka.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
And how did you feel about the weather here in Dehradun especially?
Oh, the weather here is better than it was back home. It's nice
it?
and mildly warm, which is nice. So the weather has been very nice, yes.
Oh. So you just gave a session on our scientific and literary truths, even
Yeah.
really at odds.
Yeah.
So we'll actually try to stick to that topic in this podcast
Sure,
session
okay.
too. But first of all, how did you enter into the field of psychology?
Well, when I went to college, when I was roughly your age, I wanted to save the world's teenagers. So I was going to become a therapist, an adolescent therapist. And so I took psychology courses, but I ended up not volunteering for any of the psychology services that counseling-bound students tend to participate in. So I recognized I probably wasn't going to be a therapist. And then I took a course in the science of perception. And it was in that course that I started learning about how beautifully complex the brain is.
Yeah.
And I also started learning about the philosophy of perception. And both of these just immediately grabbed my attention, my motivation. And so from there on, I got a PhD in experimental psychology and for the last 10, 20 years been writing a lot of philosophy, which is where wild systems theory comes from.
Okay. And was there any particular book that you would give credit to that, sort of
right.
motivated you into the field?
Yes, there's a bunch of them. 1995 book by Stuart Kaufman called At Home in the Universe taught me about the notion of autocatalysis or autocatalysis, which describes how a stable system can emerge in something like the prebiotic soup on the planet. And it has to do with a chemical system emerging that can generate its own catalysts. That was just a profound idea, the idea of autocatalysis. And then what I've been doing since I read that book is trying to find ways to scale that idea up,
Yeah.
to create a framework for cognitive science and then ultimately scholarship. And now I'd argue life, the universe, and everything that makes... that where we can trace the common source behind everything that exists, which in the end is energy transfer, energy transformation. And when you can put all of reality into that same conceptual framework, things that seemed like problems aren't problems anymore.
Yeah.
All right. So just unlocking those things, if you like, has just motivated a career that I'm very happy with. I mean, look, I'm here now
Yeah.
because of sitting in my office by myself for years, writing papers and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So it's been a thoroughly satisfying career. Yeah.
And can you tell us a bit about your recent work, Wild Systems Theory?
Yeah. So the reason that wild systems theory came to be is because I'm a student of perception. So for my PhD, I studied what I'll call the anticipatory nature of perception. In other words, if you're looking if you're fixating on something to the left and you make a quick eye movement to the right to look at something else, we do it all the time. They're called saccadic eye movements. They're very brief. But it turns out that if I'm looking over here and I'm about to look over here, just before I start to look, a target flashed here appears as if it's over there. It's as if the brain has reorganized how the visual world maps to my brain before I've even moved my eyes.
Yeah.
And this is what I call anticipatory perception. And as I've gotten more into the neuroscience and the philosophy of anticipation, what's become clear is that we're constantly living in multiple scales of unconscious anticipation, and we don't even know it. For example, I often use is, for example, you probably know what word I'm going to say.
Yeah.
What word was I going to say? You probably know what word I'm going to say.
Like what word you're going to say?
Now, next. In other words, when you hear me, you're hearing me in terms of what's coming up.
Yeah.
You're not just hearing me in terms of every word and then figuring it out. And the reason you can get ahead of me is because you've said those same words yourself your whole life.
Yeah, okay.
But what people don't notice is the pitch of my voice was going down as I said that. So everybody knows what word I'm going to say. Now, why is the pitch of my voice going down? I don't even know it's going down. You don't even know it's going down. But the pitch of my voice is going down because that's how we take turns in conversations.
Yeah.
So when my voice bottoms out, what I've told you is I'm finished. I'm done.
Yeah.
If you ever want to test that theory, just be at a party and start letting the pitch of your voice go down and see how many people try to jump in because they think it's going to open up for their space.
Yeah, their part of conversation is
Right.
going to start.
And
yeah.
you've been in conversations where some people come in at the same time, and then what they do is like birds, they squawk at each other for a while until one of them shuts up and one of them gets the floor, right?
Yes.
And you've also had conversations with people who don't pay attention to bottoming out. They just never let their voice bottom out because they want to keep talking.
Yeah.
But no one consciously experiences their voice bottoming out. So that's another form of unconscious anticipation, right? So not only did you know what word I was going to say next, you knew the pitch of my voice was going to bottom out, but you also knew that my hand was going to stop moving. So you were experiencing my body anticipatorily, you were experiencing my thoughts anticipatorily, and you were experiencing the pitch of my voice anticipatorily, and we don't even know it. And for me, this multi-scale system of anticipation, its memory that we're living in, actually provides the backdrop of all of our experiences that allows anything to be a stimulus. And that unconscious backdrop is just usually not thought of that way or talked about that way. And so that was one of the things I spent a lot of time trying to investigate is how we create those anticipatory backdrops.
Yeah.
And it's through experience. And then how we use them and why they matter. So that was that's the science part.
Okay, behind the research paper. Yeah.
So doing all that science, I'm a student of perception. I'm a student of a scientist of human experience. Yet when people try to describe what experience is, they were always describing it as being relational to objectivity. In other words, there's a real tree and then I have an experience tree.
Yes.
And so what's real gets defined in relation to my experience. The problem with that is that means my experience isn't in reality.
Yes.
This is just a huge philosophical problem. And for me, the taste of ice cream has to be as real as a brick.
Yeah.
Right? Dreams have to be as real as bricks. Suffering has to be as real as bricks. If you have a worldview that makes human suffering less real than bricks, for me, that's just a problem.
Yeah.
So Wild Systems was a way to try to solve that problem. And the way I ultimately solved it was by getting rid of the use of dualist frameworks like physical, mental, mind, matter, subjective, objective.
Yeah.
All those dualistic frameworks split human experience away from reality. But my experiences are in reality. They can't be outside of it.
Yeah.
So to create a worldview of me that splits my suffering, my love, my hate from reality is first of all, it's also very dangerous. It makes it easier to dehumanize people and that sort of thing. So trying to work on that, I said, instead of talking about physical, mental, I read Stuart Kaufman, the notion of autocatalysis, and I said, let's start thinking about ourselves as energy transformation systems.
Yeah.
And for the last 20 years, I've just been pushing that as far as I can. Because if I can talk about physics, biology, chemistry, psychology, sociology, geography, and I can talk about all those disciplines in terms of energy transformation and energy capture. Then I've got an incredibly integrated framework for academia. And then I can also get those ideas to work in daily life, such as I am an energy transformation system that has to sustain certain boundaries in my life in order to be a self-sustaining system, bringing that into daily life, bringing it into pop culture. It's an incredibly unifying worldview that, one, anticipates diversity. Because if everything's an embodiment of the context that it's in, then all of us live in different contexts. India is a much different context than the United States. So we shouldn't be surprised at all that not only is India diverse from the United States, but within India there's diversity. Then making the case that evolution favors diversity are the kind of things that let you make equity, diversity, and inclusion kind of work that's pro-difference as opposed to justifying difference. You know, we got to respect difference. Well, we are different. So what do you mean we got to respect it? It is what we are. Let's run into it and be happy about it. So those were a lot of the things that got me working in the area. Now, speaking in terms of energy transformation, lets me talk about everything as being an embodiment of context. For example, my bones, my muscles, my brain are all about moving they're embodiments of what it takes to move a mass through a gravity field. That means all of this is about gravity. All of this is about the earth. My arm is about my leg. All of these things are about each other. And then, if you equate meaning with aboutness, then you can see that all of me is inherently about, therefore all of me is inherently meaningful. We have ways to avoid nihilism, right? The issue in life isn't finding meaning, it's managing your meaning, managing what you're about. And I think speaking to people in terms of management versus right or wrong is very pragmatically useful. So I start talking about wanting to solve dualisms, I get into energy transformation, and then suddenly everything goes wild. And I'm everywhere doing things with, different frameworks. But it's been an absolute joy to do that. And dare I say, with no pun intended, the process sustains itself. So we just keep the work going.
You just told us about your work. But if you were to write a fictional book, have you written any?
I have written fiction, yeah.
You have written fiction?
I have written fiction, yeah.
Can you tell us what themes did you write? What genre did you explore, actually?
So I have one completed collection of short stories that I wrote from about 1995 to 2005 called The Cognitive Scientist, A Myth for Our Time. And I called it Epiphany fiction because it begins with a 13-year-old boy who says no to his father for the first time. And the cascades of transformation that brings about in him as well as his father, which is kind of the Rene Descartes, I argue with you, therefore I am. Right? Data are quite clear. Children have to inhibit the influence of their parents over their life to become someone. We don't give parents enough credit for the amount of work it takes to raise a kid who's got to not become them, but has to become an individual on their own. So that's the kind of the beginning of the book. And then it goes through different epiphanies one would experience over the life course as one moves from sort of adolescent individualism, where I've got to be free and I've got to prove who I am on my own, to a sort of adult dependence where you don't even have to recognize it, but the truth of the human condition is that we are incredibly dependent on each other. To the point where I'm not even me. What I am is a collection of all of you. As I said in the talk, right? So I am an embodiment of other people. So that means that we are inherently of, in, and about each other. And getting to a point in your life where, in the final story, a man has to tell his wife to stop trying to have kids because the process is doing a lot of damage to who she is. So if that were to happen to be the young man at the beginning of the book who is all excited about being able to make individual choices and control himself, the last thing that kid would ever want to do is try to tell a woman to stop trying to have kids. That would be a violation. But it's also a beautifully ugly adult development.
Yeah.
And so those series of stories are written, each of them has their own sort of epiphany, just to show how we get from a fairly simple, happy, intentional being to a sophisticated, complex, beautifully ugly adult.
Yeah.
And I've never gotten it published, but I wrote it.
Oh, why didn't you get it published?
Well, I sent it out to 8 publishers and no one published it, and I had other things I needed to publish at the time, so I moved on.
Okay.
But maybe at some point I'll send it out again. And I'll just say this and I'll shut up about it. It's also not a bad exploration of becoming a good man, right? How to be a male and provide spaces for the things that need to be provided spaces for in reality, while not being toxic. How do you have power and not become toxic? Is a story that I think a lot of young men need to be told these days. And so there a little bit of that's in the book, and maybe now is the right time.
Oh, sure, yes. Okay, so you were just saying that how a person is not only them, but it embodies everyone. There is a similar type of phrase that you are not you, but people you have let influence you and you have lived.
Yes.
So how do you see about it? Like, what do you think about the same?
Oh, I think that's exactly correct. Even your body, even this hair I'm doing like this, I guarantee you I'm moving like my mentor that I got my PhD with.
Okay.
You know, when I sit there and go like this, I'm sure I've embodied the dynamics of someone that I respect. So what I tell students then is be careful who you respect.
Yeah.
Because the people you respect are who you're going to allow to have the greatest influence on who you become.
Yes.
You don't have to try to let them have an influence. Just being with someone, for you to hear me, means you're letting me into your brain.
System, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm influencing you.
Yes.
Right? As a matter of fact, I could probably start talking and you'd be able to finish a sentence for me.
Yeah.
Right? Because I get it into your planning centers and it just takes over. So I tell my students, careful who you respect.
That is an important line, actually. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you were talking about truth.
Yeah.
Have your definition of truth ever changed over the years? Like, was there any particular incident or experience that you felt that, no, till this moment I thought truth is something else and now it is something else completely?
Well, by the way, that's a really good question because I could give a whole talk on the history of my own truth.
Okay.
So when I was growing up I really wasn't raised in a Christian household. My dad was American Baptist. My mom was American Catholic.
Okay.
We went to church regularly, pretty much, but we weren't religious in the sense that
That the other people were like.
Yeah, the kids went to church, but the parents didn't.
Oh.
And so there was a time in my adolescent years where I tried to feel religious truth. And then it just didn't work for me. About that time, my mom and father, they divorced.
Okay.
And my mom was Catholic. And they excommunicated her from the church, which means they kicked her out. I thought that was heinous and ridiculous to take a woman in her most vulnerable moment and turn it into a crime. So I basically told them they're not true. That was completely incompatible with being a human.
Yeah.
So I gave up on religious truth. And then when I went to philosophical truth, objectivity and subjectivity just didn't work. So I found myself siding with a minority group in Europe called the German idealists, which is, I don't think their name, but I refer to them as the coherence ontologists, who don't talk about truth as a correspondence between objectivity and subjectivity, but they look at it as the degree of coherence in any domain, which means truth is a gradient. Truth is not a binary. This is something that science has a real hard time with. For example, there are schools in the United States school districts where they argue about whether or not creationism should be taught in biology classes.
Okay.
And the scientists say no, because evolution is right, because science is right. And the religious people say, no, God is right. And what you're finding is that the religious people make their binary rightness based on faith. Ironically, I'm going to argue the scientists do the same thing. Science is not about being right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's a probabilistic enterprise. You collect data, and it allows you to make predictions with certain degrees of measurable error.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with absolute truth. It has nothing to do with being right.
Yeah.
And the problem is when scientists say creationism is wrong because it's faith, and they're sitting there saying science is right because they're using the same sort of faith model. So science has not done a good job of perpetuating itself as a practice. It's a way of being a human being. It's a way of doing things where it's just like writing a piece of music and performing with an orchestra is a mode of being. It's a way of doing things. Writing a book is a way of doing things. How we treat each other every day is a way of doing things. And to act like one way of doing things has the final say on how we should do everything is dangerous. My favorite philosopher, his name is Michael Oakeshott, and he argues that the species' greatest strength is the conversation. And in the conversation, different perspectives come together, they influence each other, they make each other go in different directions, which is how we get novelty and spontaneity. But if we just quit and say we know the truth and we don't let that, what I'll call jazz happen, we don't let that spontaneous interaction happen, then we are decreasing our sophistication. So I had to find a way to talk about truth that had nothing to do with right and wrong and absolutes. And so by reading the German idealists and Mike Oakeshott later in the early 20th century, I became comfortable with non-binary truth, and I became comfortable with gradients of truth. And I became comfortable not knowing. And then I recognized I had a lot of work to do as a teacher, because a lot of students are being taught that science gives rise to the truth. And that just puts too much of a burden on science, and it turns it into too much of a religion. And that's not good for science. Science needs to have the most open-minded, grounded people in it. And you need to say, I could be wrong tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, when I do wild systems theory, when I'm writing it, when I'm teaching it, what I tell my students is, one of these days, some young whippersnapper is going to come up to me and say, Dr. Jordan, there's this massive incoherence in wild systems theory, and here's where it is. And I'm going to say, damn, you're right. But I'm going to know that I'm in the game. I'm going to know that I'm going to be part of the human conversation about philosophy and reality. And that's because I'm not an analytic philosopher trying to find the truth, assuming that somehow the process will end, but rather I'm a coherence philosopher looking to maximize coherence in my time, the work is never done. And so I never feel like I have to be right. I have to be just maximally non-contradictory. And the fact that I end up repeating things that Spinoza said 400 years ago, but in the language of the 21st century science, tells me that I'm onto something. There's cross-centuries coherence, and it's not about being done. So philosophy's approaches to truth that act like there's a point where it's finished, I just find them intellectually dangerous and politically probably a little dangerous too. Because once I can tell you you're wrong, and you can tell me I'm wrong, really what we're both saying is we're done thinking.
Yeah.
And when we're done thinking, all kinds of bad stuff can happen, right? So that's where I am on truth right now, if that makes any sense.
I actually understood what you said.
You're very kind, thank you.
So, as you were just saying, that science is not absolute truth,
Right.
as sometimes scientists like to say so.
Right.
But as a general public, like as a normal human being, we often look up to mathematics and science, especially as something which is very objective in nature.
Yeah, we do.
But
Yeah.
we also see that mathematics is based so much on assumptions and axioms.
Yeah.
So is it just a human constructed system, or do you think it is objective?
Again, another fantastic question. So let's look at our ability to measure the trajectories of the planets. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
We're so good at it that we can land people on the moon, we can land things on different planets.
Yes.
That's the kind of thing that people want to call objective, right? That the mathematics is so good that we can predict things that you'd never be able to predict without it. Now, the challenge then is because it's so good, it emotionally feels right.
Yeah.
It's an emotional, oh my God, we put someone on the moon, man. We know what we're doing, right? And people don't know that their emotional attachment to it is sneaking up on them. And so when they get in arguments about truth, they just get in these emotional spaces where they tell creationists, you're all wrong. It's science is,
Yeah, because it can put someone in moon, so it has to be correct.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. And the thing is, some of the best philosophy I've been reading the past couple of years says the following. The only thing that is necessarily true, the only thing that is absolutely true is that everything could be different. Now, the beauty of that statement means that even the laws of physics are contextual artifacts, not plans, not preordained. They're not laws. They're just simply stable states that exist because everything works like it works. In other words, everything is inherently contextual. Nothing is absolute. Nothing is a priori. That idea just struck me profoundly because it ends up in a similar space as wild systems theory when I say everything's about everything and nothing's about itself. And it frees up the conversation. It takes science out of the position of having to be some arbiter of truth. Science is never going to tell you if you should stay with someone you're with. Should I stay with this person? Do I want to be their partner? Science is never going to answer that. What science will tell you are certain hormonal levels that might influence your decision or certain patterns of relationships that don't work out. But those never tell you what you should do.
Yeah.
Is never translates to should. And science is, predictive is, but it never translates into morality or what we should do. Give me an example. The current global crisis, people say things like, we need to do this. We need to clean up the environment. And I'm going to make people mad with what I say here, but no, we don't. And what I mean is the environment's not going to get cleaned up unless we want to clean it up.
Yeah.
Saying that we should, saying that we should do it doesn't do anything but make someone feel good for a moment while they fill their car with gas.
Yes.
Right? It's saying that word should just relieves stress. And so telling people that we need to stop this, it's short-circuiting the real work that has to happen, which is, do you want it?
Yeah.
And ask people clearly, do you want your kids to be able to breathe? Do you want your kids to be able to reproduce? Because the way we're toxifying the planet right now, infertility is going crazy.
Yes.
Because we're disturbing certain cycles in women and men that have to do with recreating the species. So more and more and more, I stay away from should, I stay away from need, and I just say, what do you want? Because you tell me I need it. You can tell yourself you need it. But what does that mean if you're not doing it?
Yeah.
Right? So just shut up and do it.
Yeah.
Or don't argue. It's kind of my case.
Actually,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation, sir. Thank you for watching. This was the Insights into Graphic Era Hill University. Thank you for watching. For upcoming fun conversations and episodes, stay connected to GEHU Talkies and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to follow us on our Instagram handle, Graphic Era Hill University and MMC GEHU Doom. Thank you very much. This is your host, Priyanka Rawat, signing off. Good.